You admit that you have slapped Tina before, but why, Ike?
She would be walking around looking sad, looking sad with a lip drop, and I keep asking her, "And what is the matter with you? What's wrong?" And it's always nothing. And it would go on for a day or two till finally, why the don't you? And then this is where I would slap her or something. Then she would change her mood or attitude or something.
While I don't agree with hitting and abusing women and shit like that, what I will say is that this is a very powerful message, right? It's a very powerful concept and principle to understand with this, right? If a woman has a problem and she can't handle it and it's affecting your dynamic, sometimes you got to make yourself the bigger problem, right? Like if it's affecting how you move, because you have to understand the psychology of things. You got to understand what dom sub dynamics are, and sometimes how things work is you have to understand transmutation. If she feels a strong enough emotion towards you, one way or another, if she's experiencing one problem, she's not in a position where she can really alleviate the stress of that problem. Sometimes you have to make yourself a bigger problem and then solve both. It's a little counterintuitive, but you got to understand that there's something called sexual polarity erosion, right? When a woman goes into her masculine submissive energy from her feminine submissive energy, then oftentimes feminine dominance is going to be what gives her the ability to get back into her feminine submissive energy, because she starts to erode into her masculine energy. And this is just something that goes along with cup theory. Now, you can't overdo this, you can't overuse it, because that can turn things into a toxic relationship. It can turn things into an abusive relationship. Even if a woman likes it at first, after a while, she'll just start pulling away because she doesn't feel safe with you, or because she isn't feeling you, right? And when that occurs, if you keep up with these type of antics and behaviors, eventually she's just gonna get tired of your ass. And then that situation will really turn abusive. And if you aren't aware, it can become an issue. But something you can do is have a way of getting a woman back into her feminine energy when she doesn't have the ability to. And then afterwards, when her energy gets back right with you, you give her some good dick, and then you give her some aftercare. The aftercare it's like the wine and the oil. It'll fill her cup back up. But you have to get her right when she's getting off. So I'll give you an example, right? One time I went to go see a girl I was dealing with, right? We was dealing with each other for a while. First day we saw each other, shit was cool, right? Energy was right, but her cup got low. When her cup got low, she got beyond the point where giving her validation or affection or attention or communicating was something that would get her energy back right. So it wasn't just that her cup got full, her cup also got too full, but her energy eroded from that place of being in her feminine energy with me, her feminine submissive energy with me. So how I dealt with this particular situation was, after I pulled out all the stops, that shit wasn't working. You know, her sex drive went down. What I did was, I did something where, let's say, she wanted to be in the bed together, but she wasn't trying to have sex. So I got out the bed, I went to the other room. Now, I've never been kicked out the bed, but I got out. I got up, I took my ass to the living room of my own accord, right? Now, the next morning, she got up and went to work. I wasn't working that day. I went to go see her. She got up to go to work, and typically, if this would happen, you know, she would be ready by the morning time, and she'll be like, you know, she'll be ready to go. Now, this time, the morning came around, her energy wasn't back right. So she was at work. I think I did a boxing lesson or something like that. I was chilling. But then when she got home from work, she saw that my bags were already packed up in the living room, right? I was ready to go. And when she saw that, she went to the kitchen, and then I heard some sniffling. She was in there crying. Now, when she was crying, I went in there, you know, I consoled her. Well, I was a little cold at first, gave her a little bit of space to miss me, right? To think about me not being around. And when she had a little space to think about missing me and me not being around, that's when, you know, she was crying. She was a little bit emotional. or very emotional. But then the energy corrected. I consoled her a little bit. I gave her some dick. Her sex drive went back up. And then instead of me leaving that day, I stayed a couple more days, and those last 2 days were better than the first 3. Right? So something to understand with this is that once a woman's sexual polarity erodes, you have to have an understanding of how to trigger. Triggering isn't always bad. A lot of these things, stimuli is neutral, right? A lot of these things are things that can be bad in a certain context, but they're good in others. If just talking to a woman isn't working, if giving her just a little bit of space and distance isn't working, if just asking her what's wrong ain't working, then sometimes you have to be able to hurt her feelings in a way to where the problem that you present to her is bigger than the problem that she's experiencing internally. You make the issue external, but then you solve that issue. And it works even better when the issue is something that you have a solution to, especially if you have good leadership, you have good guidance. She just, her cup gets low or her cup gets, big, but you're being a little bit too affectionate. Sometimes at this point in time, you have to have the ability to create that emotional reaction using feminine dominant energy, because that's what strikes up the masculine submissiveness, is the feminine dominant energy, right? And when you use that, you go ahead and flip it. You flip the scenario. You don't stay mean with her. You don't do all the extra shit. But you let her come back to you. You do what you do. Then things will be smooth sailing. But oftentimes what we do as men is we try to go overboard with this idea of communication and logic, and thinking that you can logic somebody into feeling a particular way. See, something to understand is that respect, when it comes to a woman or when it comes to a submissive, respect is about desiring your validation, having the ability to affect her emotions, right? If you have the ability to affect your emotions, then that means that a person desires your validation. If someone does not care about what you think about how they feel, right? Or if someone doesn't care about how you feel or what you think, that means they're in a position where they're losing respect. Now, when somebody's losing respect, there's different ways of dealing with that. Showing masculine frame, showing stoicism, showing a willingness to walk away is one thing, right? That's one way of going about doing it. Now, you can't overuse that, because eventually a woman's cup will get really low, and then she'll just feel like you don't want her, and you feel like you're too much of a challenge. But there's a way of going about doing things to where you understand that you can't logic somebody into how they feel. But sometimes somebody doesn't recognize, right, that the way that they're behaving or the way that their attitude is something that's pushing you away. They don't get that. Or maybe they're pushing you away because you're pressing in too much. But subconsciously, they still have a fear of you leaving. And when they recognize the idea of you not being in their presence as long as they anticipated, or of you not being around them, right, of you not being with them, then sometimes that triggers an emotional response. And that emotional response, if they're invested in you, this works if they're invested, sometimes that emotional response of feeling the idea of losing you is something that will trigger them to become emotional. And from that emotional place, you don't stay being mean. You go ahead and take your place back into your masculine energy, get her back into her feminine energy. And then from that place, that's where you reestablish yourself as masculine dominant in your energy in that particular scenario. And like I said, oftentimes respect is really about desiring somebody's validation. There's a difference between respecting somebody as a person, saying, okay, I think they're a good person, they're consistent, all that different type of stuff. That's more so how you respect somebody when you're masculine, or how you respect somebody when you're a dominant individual. That's respecting somebody as a person. But there's a difference between respecting somebody as a person and respecting someone as a leader. To respect somebody as a leader, you have to desire their validation, to desire their approval, right? And if a person feels like they're not feeling you on a certain level, they're not emotional about their desire for you, they don't desire to please you, but they feel like they already are pleasing to you naturally, automatically, just because they exist. But sometimes you have to show them that that's not the case. Especially when you're masculine dominant, you have to understand that she has to desire your approval. It's not something that you take advantage of to misuse or mistreat a woman. It's not something that you use to fuck a woman's life up. It's something that you use to correct your dynamic, and also to keep your dynamic in a position of polarity, and to keep your dynamic in a position of masculine feminine dynamics and dom sub dynamics, right? That's what you use it for. Most of the time you have to lead from the front, but sometimes something that can occur is you're being masculine dominant, you're being consistent, but you may not recognize that you may be praising a person who doesn't feel worthy of that praise in that moment. You may be praising someone who feels more worthy of it than what they feel like they're receiving, and that can cause them to lose respect because you're filling their cup when their cup is low, or you're filling their cup above what they should be getting in that moment from you. And when that occurs, sometimes you have to take a step back. And when you take that step back, it can correct things, right? It can correct things. But you got to understand these different aspects of dom sub dynamics. This isn't something to abuse, but it is a technique that can be effective to correct the dynamic in a situation. You know, because sometimes maybe the praise, the affection, the attention that you're giving, it starts to feel like feminine energy to a woman. It starts to feel submissive. It starts to feel like she's too much in control. And that can push her into her masculine energy, right? That can push her into feeling more dominant. And when she isn't attracted to feminine energy, because she's attracted to masculine energy in a man, then she'll lose respect. When she loses respect, that just basically means that she loses the desire for your approval and loses the motivation to conduct her behavior with you in a way that will create that. And if she's not in her feminine energy, and part of the reason why I say don't lead with masculine dominant energy the entire time is you can lead with it, but if that dynamic gets off, that means she's not feeling it at that moment. See, masculine energy stifles submissiveness. Feminine energy corrupts dominance, right? Now, you can give the appearance of feminine dominance without necessarily being a feminine dominant. See, one thing about being a masculine dominant is that you have your program in mind, you have your goals in mind. So there are certain things that may go against standard or traditional ideas of what it means to be moral or ethical, but you understand that it's necessary in that particular scenario. Great example of that could be like Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn was one of, if not the most in tune with the Force individuals in Star Wars, right? One of the most. He was a masculine dominant, but he was feminine and submissive towards the Force. So when it came to how he conducted himself in the views of the Jedi Order, which is a masculine submissive type of order, he would often go against their principles and their values because what he was yielding himself to was bigger than what was on the table, right? It was bigger than what they were talking about. So there would be ways that he would go about conducting himself. So when you understand that, there's going to be times where you may do different things that would go against the traditional and societal norms and ideas of what it means to be ethical or what it means to be moral. But if you have a certain level of self-control within yourself, you only do that when it's necessary. You only do it when it's necessary. You don't just do it to play around with people's feelings all the time. Sometimes a woman needs some emotional variety. Sometimes a woman needs some dominance. Sometimes a woman needs to feel like you not always just gonna be there, no matter how she behaves herself. Sometimes a woman needs to feel that your love ain't that unconditional, right? And that goes against conventional wisdom of what society says, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. You know, oftentimes society is going to lie about the nature of femininity. It's going to lie about the nature of a woman. And when it lies to you about those particular things, it can put you into a space of mind to where you feel like you're doing the right thing and the right thing is just not working. And then it'll tell you to just walk away. And in some instances, it's best to walk away. Probably most instances, it's best to walk away. But in some particular instances, you've already led wrong, whether you know it or not. And that's part of the reason why the woman's in that particular energy. And it's your responsibility as a man to correct it. But when you haven't been leading with masculine dominance from the front, which is setting your expectations and doing things that way and making yourself intrinsically desirable for what it is that you want, when you've already messed it up a little bit, you kind of got to go back behind it and do things a little bit different to correct the situation. Got to go back behind it, do some particular things to correct the situation. So, this is Coach Brody. I'm out.